Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Jeff Mendelson, and this is the One Big Tip podcast. And today, my guest is Zack Slingsby, who is the founder of Human Factor Media, where he works with a collective of writers, filmmakers, and artists raising the bar on narrative video. In a world where everyone is muting commercials or changing the channel, Zack and his team are changing the way commercials are perceived by creating brand films that resonate and create a lasting connection with the viewer. This approach helps brands bring larger than the item that they're promoting. With a strong background in advertising and digital media, Zack merges commercial and brand strategy and has directed projects from global campaigns to short documentaries. So join us today as we talk about how Zack uses his knowledge base in writing and creating content to create compelling brand videos that capture the attention of the audience. I love nerding out on commercials, man. This is going to be a great conversation. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me here.
So, I'd like to dig in a little bit on your background. Being a creative, especially in a high stakes creative world, like advertising, that that not only takes some skill, but that also takes, like a good deal of process. Can you walk us through a little bit about your background and how you got to be so amazing today?
Sure. To the extent that that's true. Yeah. Well, so one of the things you said, so deep background in advertising. I do not have a deep background in advertising, and so that's a distinction that I think has actually helped us quite a bit. Mostly our team is not made up of people with a deep history in marketing. We're creatives. We're people who come from, in my background, writing and literary writing. In the case of other people on the team, film and production, editorial work, branded content, definitely. But I wouldn't consider any of that traditional marketing or traditional advertising. So how did that background lead us here? I, I think that the evolution of branded content seems to be coinciding with creative people finding opportunities on those platforms. A brand is a stage now. It's just simple. You have all these platforms. You have to do something with them. You have to find a way to use them to your advantage, and the advantage for brands is going to be ultimate bottom line growth eventually, understandably. But in the day-to-day experience of your channels, more and more brands are figuring out we can't just put product features out there. We can't make 25 YouTube videos about the anti-lock brakes on the new Honda. We have to find a way to entertain people in that short term experience. So that's where I think where creative people come into play. They're able to do that. They have a background in that. Liberal arts background, the joke is that that's useless for most jobs, right? But increasingly, we're finding that brands are looking towards people who have the authentic creative credentials to help them out, to help them get attention.
That is an amazing way to describe all of this. One of the things that happened in my trajectory is that I got to work in an ad agency for like 6 months, right? Where I was just working on a specific project. And I just found the whole experience kind of stifling, right? And that I was in there and I just saw that they, basically what these guys did is that they got a new account, everyone celebrated, and then they locked themselves in a room for a week. And I was like, no, that's not terribly interesting. But what happens in a place like that is that, that's, like you said, the traditional advertising agency, and that can be, it can be either be highly creative or highly boring, depending on the type of creative that you are. When you approach a new brand, or when a new brand approaches you, what do you like? What are the things that you're looking for in order to see if you are a good fit or not to work together and take on that kind of project?
Yeah, I agree with your insight completely. So I'll answer the question first. We will present ideas. We'll get either contacted by a CMO or someone at a company, or we'll reach out to them oftentimes as well. and we'll ask to put together a presentation if we think we're a good fit. And usually that presentation will be 2 or 3 ideas that we think would make a big difference. We think is a departure from what they're doing. In some cases, it'll be a riskier proposition than what they've maybe spent their budget on to date, depending on how creative it is. I mean, the more creative and out of the box, and the more the more you're telling a story, the less you're focused on the quick sale. Generally, is the equation. The more the meter, the more the line moves toward actual things that people find interesting, the further away it's moving from a description of what you're selling, how much it costs, where you can get it, and here's the link, and tell your friends, right? So we will present ideas, and oftentimes those ideas they'll be in some proportion to the risk tolerance that the brand is already shown. So that's the first step, and then we see if we have anything in common. Usually in that first meeting, and if we do, great.
One of the most impactful series that I saw along this vein was the one that BMW did. Jesus, has to be about 10 years ago, where they got where they made a mini series of Clive Owen, who was in that
Yeah,
driver,
yeah.
series of movies. And then they got all these high-end Hollywood directors to direct all these chase scenes using BMW cars, right? And you don't really see, they're not really flashing you he's in a BMW, right? But they're not really putting the brand in your face. They're just showing the guy going on missions, trying to save people and using these awesome cars, really to their max. When a company like BMW goes out on that kind of limb to not just show their car driving on mountain roads with really pristine conditions and really beautiful people behind the wheels, what kind of return do you think they're getting when they create that kind of content, as opposed to, let's just call it the generic 30-second car commercial, Lisa BMW for 549 from your local BMW dealership?
It's a big question, and obviously, return on investment is the number one thing that anyone who's proposing these things in a boardroom is going to be grilled with first. And we have presentations devoted to it. It's a tricky thing. What is there was a joke about this. What is the ROI of your relationship with your family? It's hard to quantify, right? It's hard to say, well, here's exactly what I get out of my mom. Here's exactly what I get out of here's the exact return on investment I get from having a brother. It's like, the intimacy that you achieve with people that you want to become followers of your brand and of your work is it's hard to quantify, but it's also irreplaceable if you can achieve it. And you see that obviously an example of BMW. You see it with Yeti, that's become renowned. I mean, try to find another cooler in the store besides Yeti, right? It's just they're making these documentaries. They've gone so far out of their way to show that what their values are as a brand, through creativity, through film. And you see Alexis has a theater page, Patagonia, Huckberry. So these are tremendous examples of the commitment, where they stick with it, and the ROI becomes more than they could have ever dreamed. Right now, there's obviously a lot of examples where brands will take a chance and it doesn't work. And so, I'm not someone who judges the C-suite making those decisions. I understand they're like, we had a meeting with a pretty big brand. One of the things they said to us is, we have a process that works. We have a funnel that we know is effective. We have graphics. They're not using videos, they're using graphics that pennies on the dollar of what they would spend on a well-produced video. And why should they disrupt it? Why should they stop it? Uh, I understand that position. My personal feeling about it, usually those funnels have an expiration date. Usually the content that they're using that's creating short-term success will blow through a certain percentage of their demographic and then fall flat. Versus creating a strategy that's based on a true human connection, can not only is the content evergreen, but the relationship tends to last a lot longer. And we know statistically that a third of followers end up buying from the brand. And we know that the callback, what's the branding name for it? The brand recall for a brand tends to be 5 times higher with a narrative driven video than with an ad. So we have some statistics on this, but use your gut. What do you watch? Here's a question we tend to ask now to start. What do you skip and what do you watch? It's just such a simple formula, but it's so axiomatic, but so often ignored. What do you quickly hit the skip button on, and what are you going to stick around for?
Well, I'll tell you, I did buy that BMW. Right.
There you go.
I'll raise my hand
because of Clive Owen. Can you do a testimonial for us? Yeah.
No. So let me tell you, there was a certain feeling of I have arrived by driving that car. Right. And, for someone who, like I run a digital marketing agency, right? And if I pull up in a Nissan Rogue, it's like, okay, it's a typical family car or whatever. You pull up in a BMW 528, it's a different story. It's like the Rolex on your hand. It's like this, it's maybe not so subtle flex, right? It's like, there was definitely a little bit of swagger for it. I definitely smiled every time I sat down in that car. Right. But at the same time, like I could like I would get comments on it, where it'll be like, oh, like, wow, that's a beautiful car, and what it does is that it does sort of elevate your status, not unlike what this iPhone does or the Apple Watch or the kind of microphone that I'm using to to record this podcast, right? Is that there is a little bit of swagger that comes into it. Now, you don't want to be a slave to these brands of whoever puts, pretty pictures and hot models in front of you. But at the same time, it's like you want to make sure that you're buying something, that works, that conveys that status, that conveys that emotion, because that's really what they're selling here, right? They want you to feel good every time you sit down in a car. I happen to be driving right now a rental Nissan Sentra, right? Simply because, the car's in the shop. It's not the same experience, right? And it's like you feel it's a great car, don't get me wrong, but it's simply not the same experience. And it's one of those things that when you feel it, right? When you put $1,000 watch on your, on your hand, or a $1,500 iPhone, or whatever other gadget you tend to look at when you're around, there is a certain amount of swagger that goes with it. So one of the things I wanted to dive into, and this has always been on my forefront, is what is the what is the process for coming up with that kind of content, the kind of content that tells a compelling story that also resonates with the audience. I mean, you really got to know your avatar at this point if you're gonna, it would be that BMW commercial or that BMW series would have been a lot different, if we would have had Michael Jackson driving the car instead of Clive Owen, right? Let's talk a little bit about that, about how how you can approach a campaign like this, and what are the ingredients that go into a successful campaign that can resonate with the audience.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's so different depending on the goals of the brand and the type of brand. We want to think about it as what's something that's true about the kinds of people they want to sell to. What's an X factor, or maybe we would say a human factor in our case, that all these people might have in common, that we could that where there's a story in there. There's a narrative that we can take from that. That's not in itself the story, but there's a, like when you read a novel, you'll get to usually somewhere over the course of the novel, you'll get to a couple of moments in a chapter where you're just blown away because the author knows something about you that maybe you didn't even articulate. And that's one of the most powerful feelings in the world. You read that and you're saying, this person who I've never met wrote something here, and it's true about me in a way that you would have to be my psychiatrist to understand. And yet this person on this page knows it. And so what's really weird, so Walker Percy said that the literature is the problem with science is it doesn't know anything about the individual. And the thing about literature is that it's actually the science of the individual. And that principle, that literary principle, can actually be translated into entertainment, into narrative video, into branded content, I believe. And we're getting there. I wouldn't say that we're not making Dostoevsky style videos, but we're working on it. And I think that that's the way that you want to address these creative problems: is how do you start with a resonating human moment, and then work backwards to cage it in a narrative that's going to be compelling and saleable and and clickable. Fair. You apply all the crude instruments later on, but you want to start with that kernel of resonating truth.
I'd like to know if you can give an example of that, of maybe I don't know if you can name the client or not, but just sort of illustrate for us where that magic happened, how it came together, and how it became a successful campaign, not only for your agency but also for your client.
Sure. I'll give you a few examples. One is, I don't see why I can't share this, but maybe I'll find out later that I can't. But one is a campaign that so here's one that I can definitely talk about this. We're in active pre-production right now for a major brand, a household name, that on a Snapchat and YouTube series. It's a comedic series around people and the way New Yorkers will interpret news, and how might be different than the way people in other states would interpret news. Now the charge on this is, you could name it, right? It's coastal. It's hermetic and all that, which is fair enough. But it's a funny start, right? And so we know that this would be a lighthearted example, but we know that people have a certain cachet about New Yorkers, and we know there is a prototypical New Yorker who thinks about things maybe a little differently than people in other parts of the country. So we take that human insight and then we try to build a series around it in this case. So we're in pre-production on that right now. There's a brand that I won't name that we are in the pitch process on, that they sell candles. They sell candles to different parts of, basically they're named after the cities that the people have left from. So they send the candles out to the people who left from. And our whole thing there is the home. What's the value of home? What do you feel about home after you just moved away? Obviously during COVID, there's this massive shifting of people moving all over the country for different reasons. And this is a way for people to say, don't forget about us. And here's the kind of small little token that's going to bring back all this nostalgia and all these memories. So what is the significance of that? And so we're trying to do an epistolary series, a series of letters that would kind of capture that and set them to creative B-roll and things like that. We did a documentary that we got into some film festivals late last year. And so that's going to be harder to describe in these terms, but basically the idea was, what is the value of forgiveness? And that was tricky because that's a real story. We're not making that story up. So then you have to find what's the literary feature in this story, and how can we make that the central theme of it? And so that was a really enthralling project to work on, very powerful project to be a part of. We got to do a campaign for LG last year, and we didn't have much time, right? So then the question is, well, it was set in a hotel, and so what happens at hotels? Well, strangers meet each other often at hotels, and that's an interesting starting point, right? And that could be a place for adventure and the unexpected and the unknown. And so we made just a kind of a visual short film based on that experience. I can give more. Tell me if this is getting boring.
No, so
Yeah.
no, this is actually intensely interesting, because I think the common thread of what you're talking about here is, creating a human interest, creating an emotional connection. And I think you described it very eloquently. Could be a smell.
Hmm.
could be a touch, it could be a meeting, right? And these are all things that take people, to another place. Hearing a specific accent,
Hmm.
having a distinct smell. It's like, I can tell you when I land in, other cities across the United States, like I can identify the smell. When
Hmm.
I hear, well, I'm very attuned to, to accents, even within, even regionally, right? Because I'm not, like, I live in Fort Lauderdale. I'm not originally from here, right? So, a lot of people make fun of they either can pick up on my Midwestern accent or they just don't hear it at all. And, it's just funny. It's fun to riff off of that. And I think what happens is that when you're creating that kind of content, you're really playing off of those things that, like you said, that they may not think about it consciously, but then it triggers something. And if that trigger makes it viable and livable and, and actually real for the person, then you as a content producer did your job, right? And I think that's the bottom line thesis here, is that
I love that.
you're creating content,
I
of what
and how sorry. Yeah, how cool is this? You're what you're describing is a neurological process. Like you're not we make decisions with our limbic brain. It's the center of our emotions. It's what we feel, and everything you just described, a smell or a touch or a sense, or that something that's a tactile experience. That all takes place in the limbic brain. That's the same center we use to actually make our choices, what we're going to do next. Ads tend to target the neocortex, which is the part of our brain that's much less developed, and that is the part of the brain that processes discounts and features and a limited time deal and things like that. And so we're very confused about where the human brain is, where the decision making center of the human brain is. It's much more akin to what you were just describing.
One last question I wanted to ask you, and I really like your take on this. Where do you see, these types of campaigns going, especially, in the frame of, like, the Netflix and Amazon Prime and YouTube Premium, where you can skip commercials and you don't really need to see this stuff anymore. I
Hmm.
mean, I just moved into a new house, and the only reason I have cable TV is that it was a cheaper option,
Right.
to get my internet than opposed to not. And something, I went 10 years without seeing a commercial. I went a long time without seeing a commercial, and now, my wife, who's not from this country, right? She is really enthralled by these commercials, right? And some of these commercials are like really ancient to me. Like, they riff off of themes that I grew up with, right? So, like, I can hum along to some of the commercial themes, about what they're talking about. And she's just like, well, how else am I supposed to learn the brands? How else am I supposed to learn what's going on? And I'm just like, oh God, can we just fast forward through this? What do you see? Where do you see this process going when you have all these channels that are effectively trying to work against you as opposed to for you?
I understood up until the last part. What channel's working against you? Mean how? You mean in terms of
So,
the disruption and stuff like that? Yeah.
right. So, it's like my kids are, like, they don't watch cable TV.
Right.
They get their
I see.
commercials now
Yeah.
from TikTok. They get their
Right.
commercials now from Snapchat. They get their commercials now because I'm not paying for their YouTube
Sure.
Premium,
That's
right?
a great.
So, where do you see that happening?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I have no idea where it's going, but it's going somewhere very fast. I mean, to your point, the cord cutters are are omnipresent, and as you go younger on the demographic spectrum, it's not who has a cord would be more a better question than who's cutting the cord. It's like they don't even know what cable is. And so disruption advertising as a breed of marketing is going. I think. I mean, I don't want to say it's going extinct. It'll probably stick around. It'll probably always have some place as long as they can derive some positive ROI from it. But culturally, it seems to be going extinct. We have something like 65 million people in America have ad blocking technology installed on all their devices. We've just become our tolerance for advertising as a category is dwindling very quickly. Okay, we have banner blindness. We don't have patience for anything that disrupts our time. It's our leisure time. Taking a break. It's your brain just goes into a whole different mode, and you see something that's trying to get into it's like a fly. You just want to get rid of it as quickly as you can. The last thing you're doing is taking in that information. So on that hand, I think it's a matter of time. I mean, that might be a aggressive statement, but I think it's whatever format it's in is time limited. On the other side of it, great content producers. What's the difference between Amazon Prime and Lexus? It's just investment. Amazon Prime has made a much greater investment in their content than Alexis. Marriott is a huge content player. Huge. Their brand. Most people don't know that. It's these brands will continue to get further into the content game, whether it's through docuseries or reality shows, or I think scripted. I think short film and film. We're trying to get deeper into scripted stuff, and we're maturing in that place, and we're getting there. But I think that bigger and bigger brands will become more and more like Netflix and Amazon. We'll just have a ton more choices. I mean, some people will say that's the death of taste, and it's all, it's the Wild West, and everything is nothing is true, and everything is crazy, and maybe, but it just presents such opportunity for creators. It's unbelievable. It's hard to quantify. I think that as creative industries continue to become upside down as they are now, I mean, publishing and film and if you look at each creative industry, so many of them are facing utter impoverishment, and they're losing audiences, while at the same time there's this tremendous opportunity in branded platforms to go and do actual art and create actual work that is valuable. So I think that and is seen. So I think that that two-sided market will continue to be built out between artists on the one hand who have the ability to get attention, and brands that realize that getting attention is going to be a much better strategy for them than persistent disruption of consumer experience.
Very well said. I can nerd out about this, and we can sling, examples back and forth. I'm taking a particular interest right now in the content that Apple TV Plus is producing. They're really producing some really, like thought-provoking stuff. And when I look at the different, like the different options, at first it was just like, you pay $90 a month for your cable. Now I got to pay $15 a month for Disney.
Right.
I got to pay I got to pay $10 for, if I want to watch South Park. Oh no, now I got to go to Paramount Plus. And it's like, dude, just stop already. Like I'm back up to the $100 a month for my, for my viewing habits. And it's, and I think the bottom line is I really don't have time to watch all that content.
Yeah.
Right. So I got to be really picky and choosy on which content I want to watch, which one I want to binge on. Try to get my family invested in it as well. Otherwise, I'm just watching it alone on a 6-inch device when I go retreat to my room, like whatever it is. So you're right. We could talk about this forever.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Zack, can you please let everyone know how they can learn more about your company and how they can reach out to you directly?
Certainly, humanfactormedia.co. CO is in company, not .com. Humanfactormedia.co. It's our website. We've got work on there. We've got our reels on there. We have contact information on there. You can reach out to me directly, Zack, ZACK, at humanfactormedia.co, and I'd be happy to talk as well.
Amazing stuff. Thank you so much for nerding out with me on this. This was a lot of fun. I love going back and forth on it, and I find this entire industry intensely fascinating. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. I love what you're doing too, man. And we'll stay in touch.